The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 angry fists, each drop a reminder that some nights test the very fabric of who we are. Marcus Chen gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the worn leather, fighting exhaustion that went bone deep. The digital clock on his dashboard mocked him with its red glow, 11:47 p.m. Another 16-hour shift at Henderson Manufacturing completed, another day of barely keeping his head above water. In the back seat, his 6-year-old daughter Emma slept soundly, her small chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm only children seem to know. She trusted him completely, believed her daddy could handle anything. If only she knew how close they were to losing everything. Marcus had become a single father 8 months ago when his wife decided their struggling life wasn't the adventure she'd signed up for. She'd left for California with a man who promised her sunshine and stability, leaving Marcus with a mortgage he couldn't afford, medical bills from Emma's asthma treatments, and a daughter who still asked when mommy was coming home. He'd picked up every extra shift available, survived on coffee and determination, and wore the same 3 shirts in rotation because new clothes weren't in the budget. But he was making it work. Barely. Just barely. That's when he saw him. An old man stood hunched beneath a flickering streetlight at the corner of Morrison and 5th, his thin jacket plastered to his frame by the relentless storm. He wasn't even attempting to shield himself anymore, just standing there as if he'd given up, as if the rain had finally won. Marcus's first instinct was to drive past. He was exhausted. Emma needed to get home to bed. They had nothing to spare, not kindness, not time, not the warmth of their beaten-up Honda. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the old man's shoulders sagged with defeat. Maybe it was remembering his own father, who'd worked himself into an early grave trying to provide for their family. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the tiny voice in the back of his mind reminding him that being broke didn't mean being broken, that poverty couldn't steal his humanity unless he let it. Marcus pulled over. "Sir," he called through the cracked window. "Sir, do you need help?" The old man looked up, and Marcus saw a face mapped with decades of hardship, eyes that had witnessed both cruelty and kindness, and known the difference. He shuffled toward the car, moving like every step hurt. "I missed my bus," the old man said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "The last one. I've been trying to call a cab for an hour, but..." He held up an ancient flip phone with a cracked screen. "Can't get through to anyone." Marcus glanced at his sleeping daughter, then back at the stranger. Every practical bone in his body screamed at him to apologize and drive away. Stranger danger. Limited resources. Exhaustion. But his heart, stubborn and foolish as it was, wouldn't let him. "Where do you need to go?" "Riverside District." "I know it's far. That's 20 miles in the opposite direction," Marcus thought but didn't say. Instead, he unlocked the doors. "Get in. You'll catch pneumonia out here." The old man's eyes widened. "Son, I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I'm offering. Please, get in before we both drown." As they drove through the storm-ravaged streets, the old man introduced himself as William. He explained he'd been visiting his sister in the hospital, lost track of time, and found himself stranded when the buses stopped running. He spoke softly, mindful of Emma sleeping in the back, and Marcus found himself talking too, sharing more than he'd intended about his struggles, his fears, his determination to give his daughter a life worth living. "You're a good man," William said as Marcus finally pulled up to a modest apartment building in Riverside. "The world needs more people like you." Marcus shrugged, embarrassed. "I just gave you a ride." "No," William said firmly, fixing him with an intense stare. "You saw someone suffering and chose compassion over convenience. That's rarer than you think." He pressed something into Marcus's hand. "A business card. If you're ever in trouble, real trouble, call this number. Promise me." Marcus pocketed the card without looking at it, too tired to process the odd request. "Just pay it forward someday. That's all the promise I need." The next morning arrived too soon, as it always did. Marcus dropped Emma at school, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and headed to Henderson Manufacturing for another soul-crushing day. But something was different. The parking lot buzzed with unusual energy, clusters of workers huddled in animated conversation. "Did you hear?" His colleague Janet grabbed his arm the moment he walked in. "Dawson got fired. This morning. Security escorted him out an hour ago." Marcus's world tilted. Robert Dawson, his boss, the shift supervisor who controlled the schedule, who decided who got overtime and who got sent home early. The man Marcus had been trying to impress for months, hoping for a promotion to day shift that would let him actually see his daughter in the evenings. What happened? Corporate sent some hotshot investigator yesterday. Turns out Dawson's been running a nice little side operation, approving fake overtime, pocketing the difference. He's been stealing from the company for years. Marcus's mind reeled. If Dawson was gone, who would approve his desperately needed overtime? Who would manage the floor? The uncertainty felt like quicksand. An hour later, Marcus was summoned to the main office. His heart hammered as he walked through corridors he'd never been allowed in before, past offices with real doors and windows that actually opened. A secretary he'd never seen gestured him into a conference room where 3 people in expensive suits waited. And sitting at the head of the table, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blazer instead of a rain-soaked jacket, was William. "Please, sit down, Marcus," William said, his voice carrying an authority it hadn't possessed the night before. "I'm William Henderson. I own this company." The room spun. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, trying to process the impossibility sitting in front of him. "Last night," William continued, "I was testing a theory. You see, I've been hearing troubling reports about this facility for months. Complaints about management, suspicious overtime reports, workers being exploited. So I decided to see for myself. I took the bus here, spent the day walking the floor in old clothes, talking to people. And then I made myself vulnerable, stranded in a storm, to see what kind of people work here." He leaned forward, his eyes the same kind ones from the night before, now set in the face of a man worth millions. 17 cars drove past me, Marcus. 17. Some of them were my own employees. You were the only one who stopped." Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't think. "Your supervisor, Robert Dawson, has been terminated for embezzlement and fraud. But here's what he did that bothered me more." William slid a folder across the table. "He's been systematically denying your promotion requests for 6 months. You're one of the most reliable workers we have, yet he kept you on night shift, kept you struggling, because good workers who are desperate don't complain. They just work harder." Tears Marcus didn't know he had the capacity for any more burned his eyes. "I'm promoting you to floor manager, day shift," William said. $53,000 a year, full benefits, including comprehensive health coverage. Your daughter's asthma treatments will be fully covered. You start Monday." Marcus broke. Not from sadness, but from the sheer overwhelming relief of a burden he'd been carrying for so long finally lifting from his shoulders. He thought of Emma, of being able to tuck her in at night, of affording her medicine without choosing between that and groceries. "I don't understand," he whispered. "All I did was give you a ride." "No, Marcus. You saw a human being in need and responded with kindness even when you had every reason not to. You were exhausted, protecting your child, struggling yourself, and you still stopped. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." William stood and extended his hand. "I don't just need employees. I need leaders who understand that compassion and success aren't mutually exclusive." As Marcus shook his hand, William added, "The company will also be covering first and last month's rent on a new apartment closer to Emma's school. Consider it a signing bonus." That evening, Marcus picked Emma up from school at 3:30 p.m. for the first time in months. Her face lit up like Christmas morning when she saw him standing at the gate instead of her usual aftercare counselor. "Daddy, you're early." He scooped her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. "I'm going to be early every day from now on, baby girl. How about we celebrate? Ice cream." "Really? But we can't afford." "We can afford it today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today we can afford a lot of things." As they walked hand in hand toward the ice cream shop, Emma chattering about her day, Marcus thought about how close he'd come to driving past that streetlight. How easy it would have been to choose exhaustion over empathy, to let the storm wash away one more opportunity to be decent. Kindness, it turned out, wasn't a luxury for people with extra time and money. It was a choice, available to everyone, powerful in ways that couldn't be measured. One act of humanity on a rain-soaked street had changed everything, not because he'd expected anything in return, but because he'd chosen to see another person's suffering as more important than his own convenience. That night, After tucking Emma into bed in their soon-to-be-old apartment, Marcus pulled out William's business card. On the back, in elegant handwriting, was a note he hadn't noticed before: "Character is who you are when nobody's watching. Thank you for showing me that good people still exist." Marcus placed the card on his dresser, a reminder that sometimes the universe rewards those who choose kindness over comfort, that struggling doesn't mean you have nothing to give, and that a single moment of compassion can ripple outward in ways you never imagined, changing not just your life, but the lives of everyone watching, waiting to believe that goodness still matters in a world that often feels too dark, too hard, too indifferent to care.